It's another insane day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has just shown off a whole slew of new Fallout Magic the Gathering cards, turning the game into an actual wasteland.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a weird and wonderful installment of Mega Magic News Fallout Edition. So Wizards of the Coast just showed off a whole bunch of Fallout cards. It's absolutely wild because Fallout is a game set in the post-apocalyptic world, and it is very much a far cry from Magic the Gathering. So it doesn't really feel like normal Magic. On the other hand, I actually really like Fallout. If you didn't know, it has some super deep lore. There's a channel out there called Oxhorn that covers like super in-depth amounts of Fallout lore, and I have binged watched tons of those videos. It goes really deep. So I, for one, am actually pretty excited about the cards that are included here. So with no further ado, let's go take a look at them. All right, we're starting out with Dog Meat. This is a fun card that creates a brand new type of token. One white, one green, one red gets you a 3/3. That's already pretty solid to start with. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 5 cards, then return an aura or equipment card from your graveyard to your hand. I like adding the mill on because it increases the chances that you'll have something in your graveyard that you can get back into your hand, right? A lot of times with things that'll fetch stuff out of your graveyard, if you don't already have what you need in the graveyard, then that part of the card is blank, so it makes it less exciting. Now, the second part of Dog Meat says, whenever a creature you control that's enchanted or equipped attacks, create a junk token. So it's an artifact with tap, sacrifices artifact, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn, activate only as a sorcery. And we'll take a look at the actual junk token later on. But in essence, it works as additional card draw, right? Obviously, it ups your artifact count as well. But this is really solid, and having an enchanted or equipped creature isn't that difficult, especially since Dog Meat will let you get equipment and enchantments back from your graveyard. So, on top of that, Dog Meat is just a fun concept. If you don't know from the games, Dog Meat is your loyal companion, but that loyalty can actually turn out to be pretty annoying. You get him originally when there's an old guy who's being terrorized by the dog, but you can bring him onto your side by getting a leather jacket the same way as old owner had, or there's another way I can't remember, but either way, you befriend Dog Meat and he is ever loyal to you. The only problem is there's a particular area where there are these force fields. And you know how dogs will run into glass doors head first? Well, that's what Dog Meat does to force fields. And so you'll be trying to progress through the game and he keeps running into force fields. So you're just like, no, I don't want my dog to die. And you have to keep going back, right? So they actually ended up making it canon that that's how Dog Meat met his end. He ran into a force field. It's funny and sad, but I love this character. And let's talk about the special frame, the Pip-Boy frame that they have chosen as the alternate frame. This is going to go over so well. The Pip-Boy is a big part of the Fallout series, right? You have it strapped to your arm. It's your personal information profile, basically. It's your own little video game stat bar, but in real life. And you can see the way that that's shown with the little window there with the stats up at the top, the status down at the bottom, the little lined bars because the equipment here isn't super high tech with super high resolution. And you have Dog Meat hanging out in his aviators. There is a lot to love here, right? This is a sweet setup. The Pip-Boy frames are real. They look awesome. All right, next up, we have the Alpha Deathclaw. 1 green, 1 black, and 4 for a 6/6 lizard mutant with menace and trample. When it enters the battlefield or becomes monstrous, destroy target permanent. and it's got Monstrosity of 4 for 7 mana. So that is a huge monstrosity cost. But when you do it, it goes up to being a 10/10, and it's considered monstrous as well. Although it being monstrous doesn't really mean anything other than you can't monstrosity it again. So these are genetically engineered beasts that escaped captivity and obviously run around wrecking stuff. Look at them. You wouldn't want to run into one of these out in the wilds. Like in Fallout, you're somebody who grew up in a vault that's owned by a corporation, and then you end up going out into the wastelands and you have no idea what you're going to encounter. And these are the sort of beasts that you see. Like, look at it on the Pip-Boy version. It looks so intense. It's right up in your face. It's glowing eyes. This is the moment before you get destroyed. And there are variations of the death claws because these things were bred for war, right? But then they never actually got used for it. Well, some of them got recaptured in the wild, and insane scientists were like, yo, what if we continued along with this breeding program and we created hyper-intelligent versions of them? And surprise, surprise, these hyper-intelligent versions escaped, right? They basically rebelled, escaped, and now they're hunted ruthlessly. I don't know if there's any really left, but they were a massive threat. And yeah, this is the kind of stuff you'll see wandering around in the Wasteland. Next up, we've got Caesar, Legion's Emperor. This guy is funky. 1 black, 1 white, 1 red, and 1 for a 4/4. Whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, choose 2. Create 2 1/1 red and white soldier creature tokens with haste that are tapped and attacking. It's pretty sweet that it puts him into play attacking. You draw a card and you lose 1 life is another option. Or the other option is that Caesar deals damage equal to the number of creature tokens you control to target opponent. So remember, when you attack, you get to do 2 of these if you sacrifice another creature. The fact that he makes 1/1s means you're going to have no problem making more creatures to sacrifice. And on that note, I love in the artwork that he is shown with the 2 soldier tokens. So Caesar is basically, I think his original name was like Edward or something like that. He's somebody who stumbled on books about ancient Rome, and he realized that he could essentially lift the entire concept of ancient Rome and put it forth as if it was his own idea, because in this wasteland, nobody's educated, right? So they'll have no idea that he's basically just doing a replay of the past. But he is a ruthless and effective dictator who essentially goes around taking over tribe after tribe because they're only used to skirmishes. They're not used to his ruthless style of join me or we'll wipe out your entire lineage. Everybody in this village, right down to every child, will be wiped out. Caesar is absolutely ruthless, right? He's not a good dude. And he can be pretty childish too, right? So he's willing to sacrifice people. The overall flavor of this card totally works. Drawing cards and losing life to the sacrifice, making more dudes to the sacrifice, or him be like dealing damage equal to the number of guys that he has out. It all fits perfectly with the flavor of it. And both versions of the artwork give him that commanding presence. This is well done. After that, we have Dr. Madison Lee. 1 white, 1 red, 1 blue for a 2/3. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get an energy. She's a human scientist. Tap her, pay an energy. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. Tap her and pay 3, draw a card. Tap her and pay 5, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's interesting to see the energy mechanic from Kaladesh returning here, but it does fit with Madison Lee, right? She is a scientist. She does design a lot of different things. She's an interesting individual that plays a fairly big role in the world of Fallout. She is somebody who started out as an idealist and ends up becoming more cynical. She has really lofty goals. She wants to basically get purified water so people have clean water to drink. She wants to grow and succeeds in growing unirradiated fruits and vegetables, things like that, right? So you have that going on, but at the same time, you have the backscape of a completely ruined world, and she keeps being captured by different organizations or forced to work with different organizations like the Steel Brotherhood that she doesn't really agree with or like, but she has to accomplish her goals, right? So this variety of abilities, the drawing a card is research, giving a creature a bonus in power and haste. That's her being forced against her will to work on military research. The returning stuff from the graveyard is her revitalizing water and crops and stuff. Like, this is actually a really cool concept overall, taking the idea of Madison Lee and turning it into what feels like a card that has the right flavor and has a lot of versatility play-wise as well. After that, we've got Feral Ghouls. 1 black and 2 for a 2/2 zombie mutant. It's got menace. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Feral Ghoul. And when Feral Ghoul dies, each opponent gets a number of rad counters equal to its power. And rad counters are anything but radical. So these are radiation counters. And they say at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you have any rad counters, mill that many cards. For each non-land card milled this way, you lose a life and a rad counter. So the radiation sticks around until it damages you. And these ghouls aren't dead. These are actually living people who have been so heavily irradiated that their body turns into this rubbery, toughened sort of substance that is immune to radiation, but it's also a horrific existence. So most of the people had this inflicted on them unintentionally, but there are some people who tried to gain power by becoming these ghouls. They don't age, right? So there are some advantages to being these, but the disadvantages heavily outweigh the advantages. I would not want to be one of these crazy mutants, but who knows? You got to do what you got to do in the Wastelands, right? Then you've got Gary Clone. So 1 white and 1 for a 1/3 human citizen with squad 2. Whenever he attacks, each creature you control named Gary Clone gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And his flavor text is Gary. So here's the deal with Gary. The Vault Tech Corporation, they created a bunch of bunkers that protected people from all the nuclear fallout. But they conducted experiments in pretty much each of these vaults. And this vault was an experiment where they kept cloning a guy named Gary. But each version of Gary was more violent and like more unstable than the last. So they made like 40 versions of this dude. And all he does is say his own name. So when you find this vault, you keep getting attacked by the same guy who just keeps yelling Gary at you. It's a very baffling experience. But ultimately, the scientists that kept making these Garys, they filled the place up with Garys. They were going to basically incinerate a bunch of them and keep making more. But the Garys went wild and destroyed them all. So the more Garys there are, the crazier they go. And apparently, Garys, when all alone, will talk to each other normally. But whenever anybody else is around, they'll only speak in Gary. So it having squad and making a whole bunch of copies of itself and then boosting up the more you have out there, this is fun. I like it. And the artwork shows a bunch of Garys. Then we've got Idolized. 1 black, what am I talking about? I was looking at the marker. 1 white and 1 for an enchantment that says, enchanted creature has, whenever this creature attacks alone, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is a number of non-land permanents you control. Considering that you're known as the lone wanderer and you do spend a lot of your time alone, that works. The whole people like lining up, hey, can I get your autograph? That's fun. Renowned for your extensive support and goodwill. You're idolized by the community. Pretty straightforward, right? I like the Pip-Boy version better because it's got like the little pop-up icon and it's a little less cheesy than the like heart marker signy version, but they're both fun, right? And actually the power level, it's not too shabby. It's not too shabby. Then we've got Intelligence Bobblehead. 3 casting cost artifact mana rock, taps for a mana of any color, 5 and tap it, draw X cards where X is the number of bobbleheads you control. So if you have multiples of these out, that's actually pretty gross. You know, like these mana rocks have diminishing returns as you put them out. They don't really matter later on, but this one clearly will. If you're using it in a commander deck, you're only going to have 1 though. So this is something that can be used inside and outside of it. The flavor text says, bobbleheads were once an exclusive perk for Vault Tech executives and residential vault dwellers. And in game, they actually do bestow like stat benefits on you. And for some reason, the beach ball in the back keeps making me think of a Pokeball. So you can see that with the bobbleheads, they're intending to do serialized versions of some of these cards, right? It doesn't have alternate artwork or anything, so I don't know how exciting these are going to be, but at the same time, there's going to be Fallout collectors who are going to chase after these. Those come in collector boosters, by the way. Then we've got Mr. House, President and CEO. 1 black, 1 white, and red for a legendary artifact creature human. He's a 0/4. Whenever you roll a 4 or higher, create a 3/3 colorless robot artifact creature token. If you rolled 6 or higher, instead create that token and a treasure token. And he has the ability 4 mana tap, roll a 6-sided die plus an additional 6-sided die for each mana from treasures spent to activate this ability. So this is a very weird, it almost feels like an uncard in some ways with the dice rolling and whatever, but ultimately it's a strange sort of thing. It's a 0/4 and you look at it and go, what is this all about? Well, the idea is this is a dude who knew after running all these computer simulations that ultimately, no matter what happened, nuclear devastation was coming and he needed to find a way to save like Las Vegas, right? So he spent his life working on that and he knew that he wouldn't be able to survive. So he hooked himself into his machines. If you look in the artwork, you can see that's like his comatose body and his brain is linked into the computers. And on top of all like trying to stop the nuclear Armageddon, there's a situation where he has this special microchip upgrade that he needs that's supposed to be delivered right in time, but due to a delay, it doesn't make it. So he has to navigate through the apocalypse with suboptimal equipment. Picture like weird computer updates popping up out of nowhere and just sketching out like that. Like my computer did during this video. You might have heard a weird bong. That was my computer going, it's a great time to update. It is not. And thinking about that with Mr. House, this is a weird one, right? So I like the fact that when you roll a die, there's not a guaranteed chance you're going to be able to create a robot. So that kind of shows the inherent instability in his setup. So he's able to somewhat stop the destruction, but because he doesn't have his upgraded gear, he's not able to stop all the warheads headed for where he is. So ultimately, he's only partially successful. And then he ends up going offline for a while, so the Wasteland creeps in and takes over and does a bunch of stuff. But either way, a very interesting character and a cool build around me commander, to be sure. Then we've got Nuka-Cola Vending Machine. This is a 3 casting cost artifact. Pay 1 and tap it to create a food token. Makes sense. It's a vending machine. Whenever you sacrifice a food, create a tapped treasure token. So that might feel weird. You'd be like, wait a minute. Whenever I sack food, why do I get a treasure token? Well, from a flavor perspective, this is really on point. Nuka-Cola is essentially the biggest beverage company the world ever had. So before the world fell apart, they were essentially like Coke, right? And so they were everywhere. And so much of this stuff was produced that even though the world has fallen apart, it's everywhere. It's still in plentiful supply to the point where bottle caps from Nuka-Cola are actually the currency that's used in the world of Fallout. So that's why when you sacrifice a food token, you're getting the bottle cap off the drink, and that's your treasure token, which is the equivalent of money. And so you have the regular version of the machine, and then you have this alternate art version where if you don't know these characters, it's got that let's go out to the lobby and get ourselves a snack vibe from the old movies era. But the dude in the middle, that's Fallout Boy or Vault Boy. Either name is fine for him. And he is essentially the mascot of Fallout. Like Vault Tech uses him in their documentation. He's not just used for the game itself as an emblem of Fallout, but he's used by the company inside the game. And so he's emblematic. And when I looked at him, he always kind of gave me Mr. Monopoly vibes. And it turns out he was actually designed to be a Fallout-esque Mr. Monopoly kind of vibe. So that makes sense. They did a good job with that. He's very iconic. Moving on, we've got Over Encumbered. This is fun card design. 1 white and 1 for an enchantment aura that you put on your opponent. When it enters a battlefield, enchanted opponent creates a clue token, a food token, and a junk token. I'm not a huge fan of giving my opponent 3 tokens, giving them advantage, but this is a fun card that can be used to devastating effect. At the beginning of combat on enchanted opponent's turn, That player may pay 1 for each artifact they control. If they don't, creatures can't attack this combat. So basically, if you give them these tokens and then right away they can't get rid of them, on their first upkeep that they at the first combat of the turn they get to having all this, they're going to have to pay 3 or they can't even attack you, right? And so the idea in games, if you haven't played games like this, is when you're over encumbered, you move really slowly. There's not much you can do, so you need to throw things away. So that's the idea. You over encumber your opponent, and then they have to hastily throw all that stuff away because they can't move quickly. This is a fun design overall. I like it. The power level of it, I don't know. Maybe if you give your opponent artifacts they can't get rid of or something like that. It's cool though. It's definitely a cool idea. Then we've got Rad Storm. 1 blue and 3 for an instant with Storm. You get to, when you play the spell, you copy it for each spell you cast it before this turn. Or each spell anybody casts before this turn. And it's got Proliferate. Choose any number of permanents and or players, then give another counter of each kind already there. So you just get to keep piling on counters. So this is the idea of, do you have radiation counters on you? Well, this is going to make you more and more irradiated. This is how awful things are in the world of Fallout, bro. You have genuine storms made of radiation that blast green lightning down at you. That is terrifying. And it looks so cool in the Pip-Boy version. Green Sky at Night, Ghoul's Delight. Oh, forget the sailors. It's ghoul dinner time. They're coming on out in the Rad Storm because radiation doesn't affect you once you're a ghoul. Then we got Rex, the Cyberhound. 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 for a 2/2. When Rex deals combat damage to a player, they mill 2 cards and you get 2 energy counters. Pay 2 energy counters. Choose target creature card in a graveyard. Exile it with a brain counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. And then Rex has all activated abilities of all cards in exile with brain counters on them. So Rex is a weird, cyber military dog that was somehow ended up in the possession of an Elvis impersonator. So he's like the pet of an Elvis impersonator, but there's something wrong with his brain. So you end up going on a quest to help fix his brain. And then you can get him as your companion. So there are multiple dog companions in the Wasteland. And that makes sense, because if I was in the Wasteland, I would want dogs at my side, right? Cats ain't gonna do nothing. And here you have a cyber dog, but he's doing a very normal dog thing. The contrast between the chewing up a chew like a normal dog would, the glowing brain, and the robot arm that also feels like a skeletal arm that's just been stripped of flesh. It's a pretty wild mix, right? This guy even has some markings from Caesar's Legion, if I'm not mistaken. Then we got the Wise Mothman. So this is a special Mothman. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 black, and 1 for a 3/3 flying insect mutant. Whenever the Wise Mothman enters the battlefield or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. Whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, put a +1/+1 counter on each up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. This is a very weird card. You have to irradiate yourself, right? And then the mill +1/+1 counters. It feels weird, but it's also fun. I guess with proliferation, this is going to be pretty nutty. There's a bunch of Mothmen in Fallout. They're these giant mutant moths, but this is a special one that is, I guess, sentient in a different way and can communicate with people. This one I think is from Fallout 76, and I don't really know much of the lore behind it, but it is pretty intense looking, right? Bro, I just came out of the vault and all there is to drink is pop and everybody's mutants and the moths are gigantic. How many shirts do you eat in a day, bro? I don't need this in my life. Then we got VATS, all right? So VATS, this is a crazy card. VAT stands for, Vault-Tec Assisted Targeting System. So it helps you basically aim your weaponry. 2 black and 2 for an instant. It's got split second. So once you cast a spell, it's on the stack. Players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So there's virtually nothing you can do in response to split second. You can technically flip up cards that have morph because that doesn't use the stack, but that's it, right? So the artwork literally shows different different percentages there, and you can see it's targeting the head for a headshot. It's pretty intense overall. I mean, that makes perfect sense, the kind of technology that you would have, and it's a really strong card. Choose any number of target creatures with equal toughness, destroy the chosen creatures. So you can take a whole bunch of them. Oh, the flavor text says what it is. The Vault-Tec assisted targeting system redefines combat. Get your VATS today. I didn't have to struggle to remember that. It's on the card. So you can see on the other artwork, we've got another one of those crazy death claws, right? Giant scorpion in the background, zombies coming in. There's a whole bunch of different threats that you got to deal with in this game. Pretty intense feel to it, right? I dig it. I dig it. Then we've got Vault 101 Birthday Party. 1 white and 3 for first, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token and a food token. And then the second and third, you may put an aura equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. If an equipment's put onto the battlefield this way, you may attach it to a creature you control. All right, so this is basically, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the games you start out and you have your birthday party and there's somebody who tries to like take your cake from you, and like a robot screws up and instead of cutting the cake, just obliterates your cake. So the 1/1 in the food token represents like the player and the cake, and then the aura and equipment, that would represent the Pip-Boy that you're given on your 10th birthday or whatever, right? So this is your 10th birthday. Yeah, it's even got the 10 on the cake. So yeah, or no, that's a 101 because it's Vault 101. Never mind. Either way, I'm fairly positive that's what we're dealing with. Then we're going to take a quick look at the junk token here. So again, what it does, sack it, and you exile the top card of your library. You can play that this turn. It feels very red, right? Because normally that's an ability that red has. The artwork shows different forms of junk. You've got an old rotary phone, man. I remember those. The more nines you had in your number, the more hassle it was. What a contrast to the cell phones of this era, right? And then you've got a Steel Brotherhood gigantic metal helmet and an empty Nuka-Cola bottle. Notice how at the bottom of it, it actually looks like a little rocket ship, right? That's fun. We have the other token to look at as well, which is the radiation token. You can see it with a Pip-Boy here. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you have any rad counters, mill that many cards. For each non-land card milled this way, you lose 1 life and a rad counter. So radiation is a pretty wild concept. The fact that it sticks around until it connects is pretty solid. It'll either keep milling your opponent or it'll hurt them. So you win by putting radiation on them. And the more, the worse it gets for them. And the only recourse they really have is to let them naturally go away, because it's super hard to get rid of counters that are on players, right? So then there are some cards that aren't actually new cards, but they're Fallout reprints. So Arcane Signet, you can see this one has the Vault Boy looking at himself on a Pip-Boy, looking at himself on a Pip-Boy. It goes infinite, all right? Then you've got Crucible of Worlds. This is a really fun one because Crucible of Worlds lets you play lands from your graveyard, right? And what Vault Boy, what he's holding up here is the Garden of Eden creation kit. So this is something you can use to basically turn inhospitable desert wasteland into an arable, fertile Garden of Eden. This is really cool technology. I dig it. Then you've got Wasteland. I mean, it speaks for itself, right? Look at the poor Fallout boy. He's trying to get that cram, and the bones look like they're skeletal. They're cooking away in the sun. I love it. And then we have the Sol Ring, ending it off with the actual Fallout Boy standing in front of the vault. They do call him Fallout Boy. And the number of times I've heard a Fallout Boy song in my head in the last number of hours while looking over these cards, so many times to the point where I'm like, what a dumb lyric it is to say my songs know what you did in the dark. Anyways, here's where we end off, my friends. Thanks for coming by. Big shout out to my patrons. You guys are the best people on the planet. Thanks for supporting my channel. There'll be some links up for some more videos to check out here for you guys. And I'll be doing a live stream tonight on my other channel. If you want to come by and hang out, we'll have some fun. Thanks for being here. See you next time.